everybody, I'm Francesca Maximé. Welcome to the ReRooted podcast here on Ram Dass's Be Here Now network. I am continuing to explore some of the more creative arts and things that I feel really sustain us and bring us joy during times of challenge. And the pandemic has certainly been that. And I'm here today with pianist Emmet Cohen, and he is hailing in from lovely Harlem, New York, his home, and has just come back from a trip where he was touring in Russia. And I want to talk today a little bit about practicing a spiritual practice and sort of, or how the discipline of practicing can kind of, sort of work with us in ways that enable us to kind of share our best selves with the world in the way that you do. You bring joy to people. At least you brought joy to me in my household over the winter. So welcome, Emmet. Thanks so much for joining us here on ReRooted.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. So first of all, tell me, you just got back from Russia about a week ago. You were touring. What is it like to tour during the pandemic?
Well, it can be nerve-wracking for some people, but we've been lucky. I think we took our first trip in August, and we went to Vail. Right at the beginning of August or end of July 2020. And so we've been conditioned. So I've been on a few planes and been in and out of some different situations where, I guess, we're less comfortable than we used to be. But I always kind of imagine how Dizzy Gillespie or Louis Armstrong would have thought about this time. And I have a premonition that they would really, feel like they needed to bring the music to this time and, put themselves be on the front lines, really. Benny Green was like, it's your time to be on the front lines, stay home. And, as someone who's 30 years old and Russell Hall is 26 and Kyle Poole is 27, someone has to bring this music because it's a healing, it's therapy, it's all of that for the world.
Yeah,
it's important that we bring it and affect people who have gone through such a tough time in the last year. So we consider it a sort of a humanitarian effort, and it's also what we do and what we love to do. And so that's the mindset. It's a bit weird to travel and everything's a bit different. And you could have a 20-hour travel day in a mask.
Yeah.
And things are, there are sacrifices that need to be made now. But overall, I think we've been fortunate with it, and people have been really appreciative.
100%. I mean, I love the fact that you're continuing to do it, and that's your mindset, that's your philosophy, that's how you see it that way, because it really is a gift to people. Maybe I'm going to walk it back a minute. I mean, you've been, at the piano since you were what, 3?
Yeah, I started when I was 3.
Yeah, and how did that come about? And in terms of your evolution to becoming the jazz pianist that you are today? And you just mentioned some of the greats that have obviously influenced you. Why were you drawn to this particular kind of music, or that kind of thing? I'm just curious about all that, the origin story, if you will.
I started playing piano, Suzuki piano, at 3.5, and I feel that's a method where you learn by ear, and then you put the physical notes to the music after you learned it by ear, and I think really just lends itself to the way we learn jazz, which is such an oral tradition. Listening to records, figuring things out, going out to jam sessions, being around other musicians, seeing how they play and absorbing it, through osmosis. And so that's always how I kind of learned music, rather than looking at sheet music and trying to sight read it. So I'm much more, coming from an ear perspective than a note perspective, and that's a big part of jazz.
Yeah.
Of improvisational music and music where you play together with other people and create a moment or many moments. and so I think it found me in many ways, for productions in school of musicals and various things like that, and got to know some of the songs. And there were singers in school and summer camp and various places that needed accompaniment, and so I would learn some of those standards. Or I remember very very beginnings, maybe when I was 10 years old or something like that, maybe 11, 12. I was in summer camp and there's someone who wanted to sing Good Morning Heartache and At Last. And I remember not knowing and seeing a lead sheet for the first time and trying to figure out the chords. And, you know, it was just a conglomeration of many different experiences that kind of all fed into this thing. And when I was in middle school, I heard Charlie Parker and John Coltrane, and I was playing saxophone and clarinet at that time. And was taking lessons, and we worked on some of those solos, and I was, you know, playing piano and hearing Oscar Peterson and trying to understand what that sound was about. And so it was just came from a lot of different directions. Music around the house. I got to see some of the great jazz musicians. My dad would take me to see Monty Alexander,
Wow.
Marcus Roberts, people like that, and put on BGO in the house, and you know, it just came you know, to me from many different sides.
Right, right. No, I love that. I love that. And I love that you learn by ear. I mean, that was always my forte also. I mean, I played a little bit and I started with fake book and I got to like Mixolydian scales and things like that. And I was like, I'm walking away because it was just a lot. But I love that your fluidity around this was just sort of organic, and that, you know, you say it found you. And I think that's the best. What's so funny?
You know that you know, you say like the Mixolydian scales and this and that. There was a moment where I was feeling that, and I'm still feeling that, because I'm much more of like a language and an ear and a, you know, aural player than like this scale and this chord and this stuff, which is important too. But when I mentioned Monty Alexander, when I went to see him when I was 12 or 13 or 14 years old, I went up to him after. I said, Mr. Alexander, do you use the modes, like the Lydian mode when you're improvising? You know, I was a kid, and I asked him, and he's like, Emmet, man, I don't know what the Lydian mode is, man. I play
I love that.
And so it's funny that you just said, you know, the Mixolydian mode and this, that's what I was feeling. And I asked Monty Alexander if he uses the modes and stuff, and he said no. And I think that was kind of a light bulb moment where I was like, okay, they're trying to teach me all this stuff, but really, like, you know, really it's just supposed to come from here. So kind of took the pressure off at a young age, you know.
Right, which is so amazing and so beautiful. And I so love that you had the courage and just sort of curiosity to ask him that question, and that he was as authentic and as embodied as he was in his response. Because I feel as though, you know, in my experience, just in life in general, I'm a poet. That's my art, right? And so I don't study, read, format, whatever poetry. When it comes, it's coming, and it flows, and it's right. And I know when it's good and when it's shitty, and, you know, all those things. And, you know, I mean, I like to do other things like decorate and cook and things like that. But this idea of creative, meaning generative, meaning something is emergent out of you, out of whatever amalgamation of events that you're experiencing, I think is a special gift that, as a somatic psychotherapist and life coach, I'm using a lot of people's right brain experiences, their images, their sort of meanings, their interpretations of things, to get them out of just this linear, logical left brain piece, which is useful for a lot of things, and not always the thing that's going to get you to the place of the things that your heart is that heart-centered place. And so maybe talk a little bit about how that helps inform how you show up. Because when you show up with all of the folks that you bring into your apartment, you do this beautiful Monday night live stream that you can tell people. I know how it kind of started because I heard you talk about it before, but you could mention it if you want, because I really want people to come in and tune into that and donate to your, you know, to your trio, because as you said, you know, all three of you have been doing it all the time, but that you really have appreciation and respect for all of the greats that have come before you, and an awareness around not being appropriative, I believe, in the way in which you go about that, especially in this time of the pandemic, Black Lives Matter, COVID, all these things that we're navigating in terms of social justice. I really feel as though you're aware of your social location as a 30-year-old white Jewish man in the middle of what is a genre that is typically a Black musical genre.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I think you just have to remember, you know, you don't have to be European and white to play European classical music, and you don't have to be anything to come to a culture and interact with their with their art form, and you know, jazz is Black American music, but the beautiful thing about it is that it can let people in, and as long as you are aware, as long as you know, as long as you carry it with you, as long as you continue to educate, and you continue to you know, to create with that in mind, I believe that, you know, that it's all right. And you know, we're all out here just doing the best we can. And you know, anything I can do for the music, I think is more important than anything that I can do for myself, really. So I think, you know, part of our mission is to make as many people aware of this music, and aware that it's something that's supposed to be fun and supposed to be from here, and not really supposed to be from here as much, like we were just talking about.
Mm.
And you know, I've come across a lot of people who say, hey, you know, I didn't think I liked jazz, and then I heard you guys, and like, turns out I really do. And
Yeah.
so, you know, it's been part of my mission also to make people who don't think they like this music interact with it, and feel something, and you know, also incorporate other aspects of life, and culture, and different kind of musics. You know, Kyle and Russell, for instance, are very, you know, very well versed in the music of James Brown and Stevie Wonder and Prince, and you know, even everybody up until today. You know, we listen to PJ Morton, and
Sure.
incorporate his styles and feelings into our music, and we kind of just add and add and add whatever we hear. You know, Russell went through a phase of listening to sea shanties, and so, you know, he plays that stuff. You know, we Russell and I play classical music together. You know, Kyle and I
Wow.
play impressionistic music together. And so incorporating all of those other aspects while staying true to the core of what it is, Black music, and trying to come to it with some some funk, and some, you know, just natural personality.
Yeah, and you do. It's joyful. I mean, from your crazy jackets and pants, you know, you're always very colorful, and you know, I mean, it's fun, right? I mean, it's you're performing, so you should have some, I don't know, attention to the fact that people are watching you, as they
It's
should
all
be.
part of the expression, I think, you know.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Do you have a particular like thing about that you're like, you know, today I'm feeling my yellow pants versus my pink pants or whatever it is, or you just whatever's not
Oh,
dirty?
I don't know. You know, for me, it's like we do these concerts in my house. So like we'll sound check, and then like 10 minutes before, like I can see what everyone's wearing, and then kind of go match it.
Got it.
Um,
That's cool.
Unlike a gig where, you know, you show up in a suit and tie, and you're the only one in a suit and tie, and everyone's you know, wearing casual stuff, and you're like, oh, I didn't know that this gig was casual,
Right.
which happens. Or you know, you have a fancy gig, and then a not so fancy gig, and you show up to the not so fancy gig in your fancy gig clothes, and everyone's like, where are you coming from?
Right, right. You got to let loose, let the tie out. You
Yeah,
know.
so you never know. It's an expression, and people dress different ways, um, and but it's part of the music, you know, for sure.
For sure, for sure. It's part of that engagement. You mentioned a little bit about the fact that you and Kyle and Russell spend time in your trio, you know, exploring different genres or different aspects of music, different kinds of music. What is your quote unquote like practice routine? Is it that you always just get together with them and improvise? Do you write music? I know you just have a new album. You know, tell me about your creative process, and how disciplined is it or how loose is it? And I say that in the sense of obviously it's disciplined in its own way, like we were talking about with the right brain and coming from the heart. But I think you know what I'm getting at is do you wake up every morning and spend an hour doing, you know, stuff on the piano, or do you spend an hour doing yoga?
Yeah, I mean, I think in different parts of my life, it's been different. You know, it's been a different journey. Um, you know, growing up, I practiced every day for however long I had, or for however long I had it in my attention span when I was young. You know, played classical music in high school, and felt like I could never practice enough, and never had it, you know, completely down. Um, and I think when I got to college, I like really found my practice routine and groove, and I was doing 4 hours every single night, and
Mm.
I was in some competitions to the American Pianist Association, and the Thelonious Monk competition, and that really inspired me to like to practice, and really try to get a sound out of the piano for the first time. I grew up playing upright piano, so this was my first experience like having prolonged activity on a grand piano, and how this and how to interact with that. And so I had a routine I was almost doing every night, from 8 to 12 until the music building would close, and then go do whatever college people do after that.
Wow.
So that was like that was probably my most disciplined, for a year kind of period of practicing all the time, and because I had the time to do it. And then when I moved to New York, then I was getting my master's at Manhattan School of Music, but I was going out to every club, all over the city. I had this routine where I lived by Smoke Jazz Club on 109th Street. I lived.
Yep, been there.
On Broadway, and I would go to Smoke Jazz Club, and then I would go down to Dizzy's Club, which is on 59th Street, Columbus Circle, and then I would go down to Smalls after that, and kind of try to catch everyone that was playing, and maybe say hello, maybe just check out the music and see what New York was about, and then maybe if it was a Tuesday, go over to the Zinc Bar in the Village, or down to the Fat Cat, and then take the train back up and go to maybe stop in by Smoke and see what was going on the way home, and so I was going to school in the day, and I was doing this at night. I think I did that every day for about 60 or 80 days in a row.
Wow.
I was like, okay, I'm going to just go and meet everyone there is to meet in the city. I'm going to hear everything. I'm going to see everything. I want to show the people at the clubs that I'm serious, and that I moved to New York, and have the people at the doors know I moved here. And so, that was my discipline when I moved to New York. I wasn't practicing as much. I had practiced, my whole college to get ready for this moment, and now it was time to focus my energies on the vibe of New York and the energy, and that slowly turned into, okay, oh yeah, this guy's here now. Let's put him on this late night gig that pays $20 at such and such. And so then I would be on a gig and meet people that way, and then be practicing on a gig, and playing and practicing are two different but similar balancing acts. And now that or not now, but after that, I started going on tour and playing these gigs with various people, and the practicing would become being on the bandstand with Harlan Riley or Ollie Jackson or Brian Lynch or Kurt Elling, or the jazz masters played Jimmy Cobb and Jimmy Heath, and the Dizzy Gillespie Alumni Band was my first gigs in New York, and just taking as many opportunities as possible, and then being in those opportunities, and those became the learning experience, the practice, that I would learn from on the bandstand, and that became kind of like what I needed to do next. And so that I had been in that cycle almost for 7 years of living in New York, and then the pandemic hit. Obviously practicing when I'm home, and I get into like different vibes where I'm like, okay, I'm going to practice very seriously, like for these 3 weeks that I'm home, and then I go on tour for 2 weeks. And if you play piano and you go on tour, you only touch it when you play gigs.
Sure.
So there's this sensibility that you are forced to develop, where you just go sit down at the piano, and you have to like build the warm up into the gig, into the sound check, into whatever it is, and just like be able to just do it and execute without like you don't have your saxophone in the hotel room. This is not feasible for the piano. So especially if you're not the band leader, and I'm there with Kurt Elling and he's doing his thing, and I'm like, okay, I'm just playing when I'm told to play. Kind of thing. So that's a different kind of practice. And then you're learning on the gigs, and then Russell Hall and I, we would record all the gigs, especially when we were on tour with Trio, and we would listen back to them the next day in the car or on the plane or whatever, and we'd listen to them together and be like, oh, that was a nice moment, or no, that wasn't really happening. We should
I love that.
This song was too long, like man, let's try to like do this thing with I have an idea, let's do it. And then the practicing became like, okay, we listen back to the gigs together and analyze the music, and say, okay, how can we make this better tomorrow night or the next 5 nights, or maybe we've been playing this song too much, we need a new song in this vibe, or that original thing we tried, it worked, but not right there in the set. And so there's this infinite amount of ways to analyze and practice.
Sure.
That became practice. And then for the past year, I spent a lot more time at home, and really got into a different kind of practice routine, with all of the classical music that I hadn't had a chance to get to in a long time, and I also spent a lot of time with the stride pianists in this past year. Willie Lyon Smith especially, to learn some of his repertoire and get through some of that stuff where it takes consistent everyday practicing to achieve that. And for the past few years I haven't had the ability to do that, so
silver lining, so to speak.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. Silver lining with a little extra time to practice and work and do all that stuff. And I know you asked me about this before, but not only did I want to practice piano during the pandemic, but I also wanted to work on some other aspects of my life. And
yeah,
so I spent a lot of time reading in this past year, especially just fiction. I wanted to kind of read creative things that people had conjured up from the depths of their brain. Maybe come here and conjure up something from the depth of my brain. My yoga practice especially, I hadn't cooked anything pre-pandemic and forever, maybe ever, besides scrambled eggs or whatever. But
sure.
So I got that's part of my routine now, is to cook and work on my repertoire in this past year. So I was working on that, and I'm very into chess too. So I spent some time
nice
working on my chess game.
Online, or do you play with people live?
I mean, I will play with people live, but it's a pandemic and you're not seeing too many people, so
right.
Definitely online. And
have you ever played Go?
I don't know what that is.
It's an ancient Chinese game. It's kind of like chess, but there's no winners or losers really. It's interesting. Anyway, just a thought.
I'll check it out. I like logic kind of things.
Mm-hmm. Sorry, I interrupted you. You wanted to finish your thought about playing chess and the other things that you were doing in terms of your practice and stuff like that when you were home during the pandemic.
Yeah, just various things that I wanted to work on, not only at the piano, but and also the business side of what we were doing to keep Russell Hall and Kyle Poole and myself afloat, and do this live stream that we do behind me
right
every week, and we've done 48 as of this interview.
Yeah, it's incredible. Now that you say it, I was going to pop up a screen share and let people just listen to a clip of what you did 2 days ago on Monday. How's that for just for a minute or two? How's that sound?
Fine.
Is that all right? All right, hold on a second. I want people to get a flavor because we're talking about your music, so hold on a second. All right, so now we're going to just listen to a couple minutes of your Live at Emmet's Place, volume 48 from Monday. Okay. I'm just gonna pause it there and just kind of come back to you and just sort of as you watch yourself, are you reflecting on like, oh, this is what I was doing there or that? I mean, it's your nuance, the subtlety, the feeling, because you say you come from the heart. This was a little bit more of a more mellow version of something that you play. I can probably find something else that's a little more active, if you will. But what's going through your mind as you watch yourself there play? Anything? You're so in the zone.
Yeah, I was remembering the song, and a song called Contemplation, and that was a Wayne Shorter tribute. And so it's not something I played very often, but there's like this huge buildup in the ballad that happens on the bridge, and you caught it right in that moment where I was trying to like build up the energy, like to like just the climax of this like song in the same place that the song climaxes, like that I wanted my solo to get to the thing. And I was kind of trying to tell that to Kyle, sitting the opposite way. So when we play in the house, I don't have eye contact really with the guys, um, so I have to talk to them through the music. And so I was reflecting actually in that moment on how I was trying to build up the energy and talk to him through the energy, and that I was going to say, okay, we're going to build it up to here and we're going to release it just like it does on the melody, okay. And so that's what I was talking to him through the music, and he built it up, and then we like hit you hit the big downbeat, and then he went switched to the sticks, right? I think maybe he already had them, but I think he like switched cymbals or something. So he changed the color right after that, and then we just kind of brought it into like more of like a little like kind of wind down dancey kind of feel. And that's what I was communicating to him, and then he kind of communicated to me by just sticks. And so we're constantly talking to each other through the music.
Yeah, I love that. And one of the things that had occurred to me when you were speaking earlier is, well, two things. One is, from a mindfulness perspective, mindfulness is about being in the present moment, knowing what you're doing, when you're doing it, as you're doing it, being aware, sort of having that accompanying. My teacher, Jack Kornfield, talks about, loving awareness, mindfulness, but from a heart-centered place, from a compassionate, heart-centered place, not just the mind, but chitta and body-mind, the whole of the gestalt of one's essence and embodiment as a person on the planet, right? And what are we bringing forward in that way? And I loved what you were saying earlier about this, we're doing this here now and we're doing that here now, and you're always meeting whatever the moment is. So you're responding from a place of what we would call equanimity or balance, which comes from the discipline of having put in and clocked in some of those hours and time and things like that, but then opens up to this place of freedom and creativity. And really, I think what is the generosity that comes from being in this place where you started, which is we want to share joy. This is, a joyful practice. This is a joyful, connection. This is an opportunity to enable people to just not only be aware of the history of amazing Black music, but also and all kinds of music, but also to experience something directly, as opposed to have some thoughts or feelings or perceptions about what it means. And so when you're in that moment and you're embodied and you're just right there in it, I feel like you give people the opportunity to actually just be in their moment. And it happens to be often a joyful moment, but that you can't be thinking about spreadsheets when you're listening and watching you guys play.
Yeah, exactly.
I
mean, I've said it better myself.
But I think that's amazing, because you're capturing your presence and focus and attention to detail. I think enables other people or gives people a certain degree of permission to really just sink into absorbing the experience. And everything that the Buddha taught anyway is about your own direct experience and being aware of that and noticing where there are layers and papers over of what you think is something that goes together, but it doesn't really necessarily go together.
Yeah.
It's sort of like, discordant, kind of sounds and things like that, we say, well, that's bad because it sounds, off. I remember I was listening to Herbie Hancock and Wayne Shorter, years ago in Boston, and I was like, I don't know what this is, because it was really far out.
That's one of those. I was at one of those shows.
Yeah, it was. But I was like, but you can't ignore it, and for me to be able to recognize that my preference was for what you play on Monday nights, but I recognized that there was an experience I was having that was very embodied and very direct around listening to that music that they were offering, that I found unpleasant, but it didn't make that music bad or them bad musicians, and your music good or a good musician. It just made it different. And so this idea of preferences, I think we can bring into just our awareness in terms of getting into the moment and being mindful of the joy that we're experiencing when we're listening and being presenced by you and your friends.
Yeah, I mean, it's also, you have to understand that Herbie and Wayne, what they were doing when they were my age was a lot more accessible. And there was a particular path and a particular journey to let them be able to be on stage and play music that they heard the birds, that they heard, that they hear in their heads, that relate to the birds and the wind and the ocean, and they're really trying to play the sounds of the earth and the universe and the galaxies and you know all the things that they did leading up to that moment kind of made it makes it make sense and makes it like authentic. And there is that these people play the blues, these people play with Miles, these people do their own. Wayne Shorter
100%.
Art Blakey for Congo African drums forever and ever and ever, wrote all the music for that band. And this is kind of natural reflection of what comes out after so much of their lives are lived. And so there's also something really special in that, and I always try to remember that as well when I'm listening to any of the jazz masters do what they do.
Yeah, no, and I so appreciate your offering and your insight on that. And I guess I'm sort of naming and recognizing that it was different for me to experience that, and I noticed that there was a part of me that found it less pleasant. But I have absolutely no qualms and no doubt that all of what you just say is 100%, because as an artist you're always, you know, if you're not emergent, what are you? You know what I mean? You can't just be like, okay, I'm going to do this, happy birthday again and again and again, whatever version of that,
Yeah.
cookie cutter thing is. And you can always find a new thread to interpret or to allow to flower out, I'm sure. But it's a question of whatever it is that's coming forward is coming forward for a reason, influenced by all those things. And I loved what you said about playing the sounds of the earth and the cosmos and the galaxies and all of that. And that resonates for me. And I know that, there are practitioners also in terms of, sort of spiritual practices that are
Yeah.
interconnected with their music. So tell me about your yoga practice. How did that come about, and how does that help support or inform your music playing, if any, if it does?
I mean, it really came about. I had some injuries with my hips, and
Mm.
I didn't have time to go to physical therapy or try that. And they said, the only way to fix these torn labrums is to go to, get these surgeries and need them on both sides, and recovery is 9 months apiece. And
Oh God.
I said, well, I don't really have, time or energy for that in my life, and it's not guaranteed, full recovery. And so someone told me to kind of check out this physical therapy stuff, and I noticed and found out and read that it was directly related to yoga. So I started going, um, started a yoga practice, and started going and found a teacher that I really connected with, and
Yeah.
just practiced multiple times a week, every day. And that was about 3.5 years ago that I started that.
Mm-hmm.
And I couldn't even touch my toes at that point. So I came to it
Ah.
largely from a physical perspective. Like, I wanted to, really master some more of the physical aspects of my body. And it was just started with something. The goals developed. First, it was I just want to be able to touch my toes. And
Mm-hmm.
after months and months, maybe a year, I was finally flexible enough to my hamstrings and my back and my you know body. And as I was learning, I learned how the breath integrated into all of this. And it really kind of reminded me of the way that I always thought about my breath when I play music.
Mm.
And when you're lost, or when you're unsure, or when you're nervous, when you're feeling anything, you can always return to the breath. It will always be there. um,
Mm.
and through competitions that may be super nervous, through playing for the first time with jazz masters like Ron Carter, who maybe at maybe a younger age, when I hadn't done as much.
Sure.
Those things would make me so nervous, and coinciding with the yoga practice, like I always realized that the breath is something that's always constant as long as we're here and as long as we're alive, and that we need to honor it, and we need to be aware of it sometimes, because it's this thing that happens that we're often not aware of, and when we become aware of it, we can tap into another kind of power and another kind of depth that really links our minds and our bodies together. And so it was always something that I considered in music, and then when I learned about it, learned the power of it, and as it relates to body and meditation and quieting your mind and quieting your heartbeat, and how powerful of a tool it is, then I even got deeper into it. And so I've been practicing yoga for 3.5 years now, and it's been part of my life a couple times a week at least.
Wow.
It's something that you can do in a hotel room, to stay active, to stay in shape. It's something that you can do in place of a nap to get energy.
Yeah.
It's something that you can turn to after a long flight. I can turn to that to feel better, or to shake the jet lag, or it's just another tool to help me in my life. And I'm glad that I found it, and it continues to inspire me in many different ways of thinking. And you always find a different teacher who has a different way of approaching it, and makes you think about things differently, and it makes you think about a lot of things differently, not just about the yoga practice. So it's something that's interconnected in many things we do, just like the breath is, and the mind and the body, and the connection between everything. So I love the connections that it makes in my life.
I love what you're saying, and I love that it's the breath is with you for as long as we're alive. We can always return to it, and how that can be an anchor. And in mindfulness practice, it's really just that. It's that when we get lost, when we get taken away, just like you're saying, when you're on stage, but even in life. I mean, in a way, life is a stage, right? And so we're sort of navigating that, and to just kind of come home to ourselves and remind ourselves we have a home here.
Yeah, and a lot of things that they say, especially at the end of or at the beginning or end of practice, even something as simple as for yourself, and something greater than just yourself.
Yeah.
And that's something that one of my gurus always says. You do this for yourself, and something greater than just yourself. And so it's like fairly open ended, but it's it reminds you that like that you're doing this for you, but you're also doing this so that you project onto others something that might be able to help them, and that's what the music is about.
Right. Well, there's a fluidity there, I think, right? Because you're receiving from the audience, even if it's a virtual audience. I know you have a couple people sometimes on your couch when you're in the room, and clearly you're feeling the vibe of the other musicians that are there. So you're not always alone, although during the pandemic it's different. But maybe speak a little bit to that exchange, because from a mindfulness perspective, we talk about interdependence, we talk about causality, things as process, nothing is fixed. That we think that we're these little, two-legged, two-handed, mammals that walk around and have language and all these kinds of things. But that kind of cuts into this idea of being separate sometimes, in a way that, yes, we honor our uniqueness, and we're part of this collective in this process and exchange. So we're offering and we're receiving. We're offering and receiving all the time, just like you and I are right here on this chat. And then I want you to talk about your new album.
Yeah. Which part did you want me to go first?
Well, the offering and the receiving.
Yeah. Well, I think that jazz has existed in very many different kinds of formats always, and the offer and exchange is different in each of those. It's going to be different if you're playing in an art gallery. Different if you're playing in a European classical concert hall. It's different if you're playing a speakeasy where people are dancing, partying, going on dates. It's different if you're playing on a live stream, and it's over the camera. And I think it just exists in many different places, and the music adapts, and it's flexible and improvisatory, and I try to play in a different way, depending on where we are, how well versed they are in what we do, what their attention span seems to be like, what the with it, if it's a soulful audience in Detroit, it's going to be different than the audience in Japan.
Right.
It just is. And to realize that, to adapt quick, and then to play in with that in mind, not to pander to anything, but to keep that in mind, and to know who
Sure.
you're talking to. The way we interact when we talk to someone new. We assess who we're talking to, and uh, we come up, in our brain with a way of communicating, and that's how, I'll talk to you differently than I'll talk to some of my friends, and that's just how, I play differently with some people, rather than others. And when we play on camera, it's a totally different thing that it's taken us a good chunk of a year to learn how to make that happen, uh,
Mm.
and how to say, okay, can we this work on camera? Does this work? Oh, does it work when I, look into the camera? Does it work when I avoid the camera? And to get to know that situation, is just another, has been another journey for me and for Russell and Kyle and for all the different guests that we have.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Sure. So let's talk about your album.
Yeah, so it's called Future Stride, and it just came out in January of 2021. And it features Russell Hall and Kyle Poole, the trio. And we actually recorded it pre-pandemic, which is pretty funny.
Wow.
We had no idea that this was going to happen when we were recording the album. And it features Melissa Aldana, one of the great tenor saxophone players of our time, and Marquise Hill, the trumpet innovator. And it's the first time I've really taken all the lessons from the Masters and the Masters Legacy series. Thing that I've made a series of records with jazz masters, and made it my mission to learn from them, and been able to take all those lessons that Kyle and myself and Russell and my whole generation has learned from doing these projects, and bring them into our generation, and use those teachings and those the philosophies to create with the young masters of our generation. And so that's been like a really awesome kind of thing to experience.
That's so great. I know you. This whole thing of being with Russell and Kyle in your apartment on Monday nights doing this stuff sort of came out organically from the pandemic. I heard you talk a couple times about how you sort of went shopping for cables and sort of just had an idea one day to sort of say, how do I get enough equipment that isn't too expensive to just kind of make this work? And then it's really turned into this thing where you've had 50 episodes basically. And is that something you're going to continue to do indefinitely, or what's next for you and the trio?
I don't know. I think, when we decide what's next, too often in our lives, um, then we're wrong, about what's next. And so I really like to just kind of, follow whatever's just happened, whatever the vibe seems like it should be. And for me, the pandemic hit, and we said, okay, all these tours are canceled. Let's do a little live stream in the apartment. It turned in from an iPhone recording. It turned all the way into 4 camera setup with microphones on all the instruments, as video guy, a sound guy, someone working the back end on the internet on the other side,
Mm.
for the Facebook and YouTube, and a piano tuner who comes every Monday to work to tech the piano, and then different guests and various people coming in and out of the episodes, and so I never would have imagined that, if I couldn't have planned that. And so I like to just see what happens, and then come up with an idea, and then kind of just develop the idea in whatever way. And people still consume this and still want us to come and play on Monday nights, then that's what we'll do. If people looks like people aren't watching anymore and it's not really happening, then we'll pivot and find something else.
Mm.
um, and so I think that's the improvisatory nature of it, and really just try to just come to it with a sense of goodness and joy and respect, and
And you do.
try to see what we can do.
Goodness, joy, and respect. Emmet Cohen. People can find you online at
No, it's
masking.
emmetcohen.com,
That,
EMMETCOHEN.com, or Instagram and Facebook and YouTube and
yeah, all that.
all those places now. But the best place is to sign up for a newsletter, and then I, put all my information in there that people should know.
Beautiful. And you write a beautiful blog once a month or whatever it is that you do about that. And I remember reading your post on some of the stuff that had happened last year with the Black Lives Matter movement and just the various, things. And it's really, I think you do spend time reflecting and meeting each moment and coming from, and you keep pointing to your heart, your chest. And I love that because that opening, I think, is what ultimately perhaps will save us. So.
Mm.
I just want to say thank you so much. Deep bows to you, Emmet Cohen, for sharing your joyful nature and spirit with the world and whatever beings are all beings everywhere, as we like to say. And thank you for joining me on the ReRooted podcast today.
Francesca, it's my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
All right, take it easy.